Have you ever been convinced away from a position that you previously had?
Only when it came to work.
Only when it came to work. So you're going to tell me that you spent until you started working, like maybe what was that when you were 15 or 16? You have maintained all of your beliefs since you were a child, and the only beliefs that you have changed have been apparently for work. Is that correct? Like you still believe?
I changed my mind on how I was building something, though.
Okay. So you still believe in the tooth fairy then? What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Today, we're taking a look at a clip from The Line. If you would like to, please go down below to the description and find a link to The Line and to the live stream that this video clip is coming from. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to The Line. I host over on The Line at least twice a month, so I hope to see you over there. All right, let's get on into the clip. If you're ready to fuck around and find out what this crazy ass caller's talking about today, then please stay tuned.
Dave is calling from Washington. Dave either has no pronouns or he has to have pronouns, or they have to have pronouns, or she has to have pronouns, but doesn't seem to have a pronoun preference. Maybe we'll get to that. Maybe we won't. But Dave's a realist. I don't know whether Dave's called in before as a theist and now is saying realist. So, Dave, what's going on and what are you calling about? Dave, are you there?
I'm getting a lot of feedback.
You're getting feedback through the phone, or are you watching it somewhere else? Because we didn't hear anything at all from you until we heard.
I'm getting both of you talking at the same time.
Both
yes,
of who?
I'm here.
Are you watching this show on your phone?
I got it. Actually, let me turn off your channel and I'll talk to you on the phone.
Yeah, that's the way we're supposed to do it.
Hang on just a second.
No problem. We've had
okay, now I got you.
Cool.
So Dave, what's your video?
What's going on, Dave? What do you want to know?
Well, basically, I call myself a realist because I don't have a better term for it. And I've watched these shows for a little bit, not much. And they make absolutely no sense to me because nothing you'll get for evidence on either side is anything but anecdotal evidence.
So, Dave, let me...
Are you there?
Dave, how do you know that is what Matt asked.
I know that because everything an atheist or a theist will say is based on personal experience.
Okay.
There is no proof they can give you.
Name something that isn't based on personal experience when you're reporting.
Well, that's exactly my point. You can't.
Okay. So if everything could ultimately be reduced down to you're just saying what your personal experience is, are you suggesting that we should never have discussions or arguments about information and evidence on any subject? Because all that, whatever you said about the theistic thing is going to be true for every subject, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So
why should I bother? Why should I bother? I don't agree with you that it's all useless. Do you not think we can know and learn things? Do you not think we can figure out when we're being reasonable and when we're not?
Well, of course you can.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that
Dave, stop. Dave, listen. If you agree that we can find out when we're wrong and we can be reasonable and we can be unreasonable and we can identify when we're making those thinking mistakes, isn't that enough reason to have discussions about points of disagreement?
It depends on the disagreement. Do you believe? Well, let me put it to you this way.
I'm sorry, Dave. Your audio quality is really bad. I'm just trying to understand what you said. I asked, do you not think it's worth it to have discussions about areas of disagreement? And I didn't understand what you said after.
I basically said it depends on the area of discussion.
Why?
No,
Dave. Why would it matter what the area of discussion is if there's a way for us to find out whether or not we're wrong, or at least discuss why we think someone's wrong.
And again, it depends on the subject matter.
No, I don't, Dave, you're not listening. Maybe
Yes,
that's why this is all, no, you're not, which is why this is all confusing to you. When I say, why would it matter? Why would it depend on the subject matter? You can't answer with, it depends on the subject matter. That's not an explanation for why the subject matter matters.
It's amazing.
Wait, what's amazing? What's amazing, Dave? What's amazing? That you didn't listen and said that you were?
No, what's amazing is the fact that, well, let me ask you a question. This is a one.
No, Dave, you don't get to.
3 weeks ago.
Dave, you don't get to ask any questions until you answer the question I asked you.
It depends on the subject matter.
Okay, Dave, now
If you want to have a discussion about whether water's wet, we can have that discussion.
Dave, okay, I'm going to mute you, Dave, because you don't know how to have a discussion, which is not going to go very well here. 2 separate times I've asked you, why does it depend on the subject matter? And both times, even once after being called out for not listening and not giving the appropriate answer, both times you replied with, it depends on the subject matter. So, Dave, for the last time, why does it depend on the subject matter? Please answer that question.
It depends on the subject matter because if you're going to have a discussion, you need to come up with evidences that can be proven or disproven.
No, you're wrong. So,
See,
if the discussion,
do that all the time. You're wrong.
No,
Period.
no, you are wrong, and now I'm going to explain to you how you're wrong. This is how this works. See, I paused long enough to make sure that you're actually paying attention because you have a habit of not paying attention. So, if the issue here is that someone is convinced that a God exists, and I'm not convinced, then the only thing that matters is, can they demonstrate their case? The burden of proof is on them. If they fail to defend the burden of proof, then I am in the correct position by default, because my position is not asserting you are wrong. My position is not asserting there is no God. My position is what you have presented is not sufficient to warrant belief.
Okay, that's why I wanted to ask a question.
Okay, what's the question?
Are you a strong atheist or a weak atheist?
That depends on which God we're talking about. For most atheists, I'm probably a weak. No, absolutely, Dave. Please stop talking over me, miss.
Okay.
Do you recognize that the different God claims that people make for a variety of different religious or supernatural beliefs are in fact different? They have different qualities, correct?
Sure.
Okay. So if somebody comes up with a God claim that is logically contradictory, I would be a strong atheist because that God is in contradiction with itself and violates the principles of logic. If in fact someone advocates for a God belief that is in contradiction with accepted facts in reality, I would also be a strong atheist on that. Each God claim has its own criteria, and that changes whether or not it is believable or rejectable. Untestable, unfalsifiable gods, one cannot and should not be a strong atheist about, but for testable and falsifiable gods that have been tested or failed to demonstrate their truth, one can be.
Then tell me one falsifiable god.
That's not my job. But if somebody says, my God is the God that makes Matt flap his wings and fly, that's testable and falsifiable, and it has not happened. If somebody says
and it
their
won't
God
ever
is their,
happen.
You don't know that, Dave.
How do you know that?
Yeah, that's why I asked at the beginning. You're the one that made assertions about what's possible to demonstrate and how this is all futile. See, the issue here is that we do this show. Stop, Dave. We do this show to answer your question because we care about whether or not beliefs are justified and what kind of world we live in. And beliefs have an impact on our decisions, and they have an impact for everybody. And unlike you, there are people who can have conversations, understand the burden of proof, and recognize that If there's no way to determine whether or not there's a God, then they are in a position where they are believing something for the particular God they're talking about that isn't justified. And then they can change their mind. Matter of fact, if they're honest, their mind is already changed because belief isn't subject to the will. And so if you find out that you don't have a good reason to believe something, you stop believing it.
So you're telling me belief requires burden of proof?
No, I'm saying that belief is the state of being convinced of something. And being convinced, you can become convinced for good reasons or bad reasons, and you can become convinced with a misunderstanding about the burden of proof. But every claim carries with it a burden of proof.
If it's a claim. A belief is not a claim. A belief has
No, Dave,
the person
Dave,
who believes
Dave,
has
if
faith.
somebody says, Dave, if somebody, no, you're confused. Belief is the state of accepting Dave, you are confused. Please stop saying no. You'll get to speak when I'm done, maybe. A belief,
Okay.
and believing is the state of being convinced that a proposition is true. If you say, I believe X, you are saying you are convinced X is true. X may or may not be true, but that's also independent from whether or not you have good reason to believe that X is true. And so when you say, I believe X is true, my question is going to be, why do you believe that? Because if you can't provide warrant, then your belief is irrational and unjustified. Does that make sense?
Okay. Let's get into the burden of proof then. If a person's making a positive claim.
I'm sorry, Dave, because I asked a question. You're really bad at listening. I asked a question.
No, I'm trying to have a conversation.
No,
you don't want to have.
No, I want to have the conversation. You're really bad at listening and understanding. I just asked you if that makes sense. All you had to do was say yes or no, and then you can move on.
No.
But you didn't do that.
Okay, no, it makes no sense at all.
It doesn't make any sense to you that if somebody believes something, they have accepted it on the basis of some burden of proof.
No, a burden of proof rests on the person making a positive claim.
No.
If a person says, I believe in this, yes,
Dave,
you want me to read?
No, I don't need you to read anything. I need you to listen and really try to focus. I'm going to get John in here in just a second because we're spinning our wheels because you don't understand this. I'm saying, here's a claim. We'll just go with the God claim. Some God exists. That is a claim. Let's see if we can do this. I really want to try and do this. So Dave, would you agree that the statement, some God exists, is a claim?
I'll agree with that, yeah.
Okay.
The person's making a positive claim.
Just stop, Dave. I don't need you to expand on this. I need you to focus, dig in. This is going to be really easy if you just dig in. Okay. So you and I both agree that the statement, some God exists, is a claim. Does that claim carry a burden of proof before it should be accepted?
If it's a claim, yes.
Cool. Yeah, cool. If somebody believes that claim and states that they have a claim, have they adopted a burden of proof to justify why they believe it before anyone else should accept it?
Well, you're twisting the words around.
No, sir. I'm not twisting any words around.
Yes,
what I'm doing is leading you to the trough of reason from which you refuse to fucking drink. This is logic 101. Here's a claim. Some God exists. Person A accepts that the claim is true. They don't have to prove it to anybody. But if they say, I believe this claim, and you should believe this claim, then they have adopted a burden of proof to demonstrate that we should believe that claim, correct?
Sure. Because they're making a claim. They're an assertion.
Yes.
They made an assertion about a positive claim. That's a given.
I understand. I don't need you to reiterate it to me, Dave. I've been teaching this for 20 fucking years. If you just dig in, we wouldn't have to repeat this. So, do you believe that there is a God?
I have no proof of one.
I didn't fucking ask you whether you had any proof. No, Dave, did I ask you if you had any proof of a God?
You asked if I believe in a God. If I don't have proof of it.
I didn't ask you if you had proof of a God, did I, Dave?
See, that's the problem.
Dave, I'm muting you because you are now entering dishonest category. I asked you if you believed. I asked you, are you convinced some God exists is a true claim? Then your response to that was absolutely dishonest as fuck, which was to say, I don't have proof of that. I didn't ask you about the status of whether a God exists or whether you had proof for it. I asked if you were convinced of it, which is a yes or no question, because you can become convinced for good reasons or bad reasons. You can become convinced with proof or without proof. And so it's possible for you to acknowledge that you don't have proof or good evidence and believe. And it's possible for you to acknowledge that you don't have good evidence and not believe. Does that make sense?
That makes no sense whatsoever.
Okay.
Because you're missing one important fact.
No, Dave, if that doesn't make sense to you, I cannot help you, but maybe John can. I've talked enough. If the basics of the most simple, hey, do you have a good reason to believe this, is a separate question from, hey, is that true? Those two questions are different. And you can believe something whether you have good evidence or not, whether you have proof or not, whether you think you have proof or not. So when I ask you, do you believe something? That's a yes or no question. There's no reason for you to utter any phoneme at all other than that, because once we establish whether or not you're convinced, my next question would be, why are you convinced? Because then you can say, well, I can't prove it. And then I would say, you know what? I didn't ask you if you could prove it. I asked you why you're convinced. If I say, why are you wet? And you say, I can't prove it's raining, you have not answered the question. I'm sorry that the basics of logic seem to escape you. Maybe John can do better.
Ma'am, maybe we can get back to recenter ourselves here. You're kind of curious as to what's the point in having these discussions, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. Have you ever been convinced away from a position that you previously had?
Only when it came to work.
Only when it came to work. So you're going to tell me that you spent until you started working, like maybe what was that, when you were 15 or 16? You have maintained all of your beliefs since you were a child, and the only beliefs that you have changed have been apparently for work. Is that correct? Like you still believe?
I changed my mind on how I was building something. So
okay, so you still believe in the tooth fairy then?
I never believed in a tooth fairy.
Okay, so you as a child you never believed in a tooth fairy. Can you is there one particular belief that you've previously held that you no longer have?
Just out of curiosity, when my question is, why do you...
No, I'm so sorry. Jesus Christ, this happened to Matt, and now it's happening to me in this conversation. I ask a question, and then you rudely just totally act like I did not ask you a question. Can you please answer a question? Like Santa Claus, fucking Easter Bunny, like something that a child would believe. Have you changed that?
If you want to go that far back, yeah, when I was a young little 5-year-old, yeah.
Okay, good. And your belief changed because of new information, correct?
Uh-huh.
Okay. When we have conversations on here, there are people that are either ignorant of certain pieces of information, or they've just never heard of a good argument that would sway them in an opposite direction. And so that's why at least I engage in these conversations, is because maybe I can convince somebody away from it, or somebody in the audience who has similar questions or has similar positions can also be convinced away from a position because of the arguments that I either make or the information that I present. That's why it's important to have these conversations. Also, I would like to note that a good majority of the US right now thinks that angels are real and that you can pray and stop a bullet. So like I feel like these topics, these conversations are important to sway people away from thinking that the blood of Christ is going to protect them from COVID.
How do you know it doesn't? What is your evidence that you can believe that?
Prayer is magic. It is not going to prevent any disease. Do you think that if prayer had any chance in hell of either preventing disease or stopping a bullet, that, you know, people that are in the middle of prayer would be protected from a bullet?
I didn't say that. I was talking about COVID.
How do I know? No, you asked, how do I know that doesn't work? And I'm telling you right now that there are many instances, not just recently, but there are many instances of people praying for something and it not doing shit. It not having a real effect. So when you ask me, how do you know that prayer doesn't stop COVID? Because I know how viruses fucking work, and I know that prayer doesn't have a chance in hell of having any kind of real effect in reality. So the likelihood of prayer actually doing something is close to nil.
Yeah, and I have a slightly different take, which is really, really close to that, which is all of the evidence we've had is that prayer never provides any evidence that it actually works and in a causal sense. That doesn't prove that it doesn't work in an absolutist sense, but what it means is there's no reason to suspect that it would work. We would need new evidence. And so, Dave, what is it you think we're wrong about? Dave, what is it you think we're wrong about?
Because every bit of evidence you're going to get from anybody is strictly anecdotal.
Dave. You just completely suck at this. I didn't ask you to make predictions about what evidence we can or can't get, because that's another area where you are absolutely delusional. Just like you were delusional that you've only ever changed your mind on a work thing. You're also delusional in the sense that you think you can predict what evidence will or won't show up in the future or under different circumstances. You'll never get this. I don't need you to make those sorts of predictions. What I asked you, matter of fact, here, let's try this. I'm going to unmute you, Dave. Dave, what question did I ask you?
I ain't going to play that game. You want to state something?
That's because you don't know. That's because you don't know, because you don't listen. I asked you, what do you think we're wrong about? And you ignored it and tried to go on. So this is your only chance, Dave. What do you think we're wrong about, as succinctly as possible?
I think you're wrong about the evidence you will accept or not accept.
Okay, I'm going to pause you there. So you think that what we're wrong about is what evidence we're willing to accept. Is that an accurate reflection of what you just said?
Basically, yeah.
Cool. If you think these conversations are futile, why did you call in to tell us we're wrong? Do you have a way to demonstrate with evidence that we are wrong about what evidence we ought to accept?
Okay. Well, let's put it this way.
Question.
I don't know.
That's a yes or no question.
State it again. I don't think it is a yes or no question.
It absolutely is. I asked you, well, I started with, why did you call in? And the question was, do you have evidence to present that will convince us that our standards of evidence are wrong? That's a yes or no question.
It doesn't require evidence to prove that your evidence is right or wrong, because you can't prove your evidence is right or wrong.
Dave, thank you. You called in because you think we're wrong about what evidence we're willing to accept. You have just now acknowledged that you don't have any evidence that would show that we have bad standards of evidence. And you asserted that there's no way to show whether or not we have bad standards of evidence. So you are calling in under the delusion that we're wrong, under the delusion that there's no way to show that we're wrong. And you think all of this is futile. And Dave, when it comes to conversations with you, you're correct. This is a complete waste of everybody's time. Because you can't come in saying, I think you're wrong, but I can't prove it. Because all you've done is waste everybody's time.
And I give you some anecdotal evidence then.
I'm not interested in anything. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not interested in anything from you at all. But I will ask you, why did you say that you don't have preferred pronouns? Is it because any pronoun will do?
Yeah, whatever you want to call me. I don't really care.
Cool. Have a nice day.
You too.
Okay.
Matt, that was a crazy fucking call right there. I mean, I've only experienced that in the South where you ask a question and then they just totally ignore you because they have this superiority complex. And I don't know if this is like common throughout, but like, man, that was harsh.
Yeah.
of the caller.
I can summarize the problems that Dave has. So here, and it kind of shows up in a subtle difference in how John and I answered the same question. How do you know prayer doesn't work? John's talking, sorry to speak for you briefly, but it's for clarifying. John's talking about this in a colloquial sense, the way we all would if we weren't in a debate and parsing our language down to the syllable. Whereas frogs don't fly. How do you know frogs don't fly? Have you looked at every frog everywhere on the planet throughout history? Nope. But we have no evidence for frogs flying. We have good reason to think that frogs don't fly. Every time we've tested whether or not frogs could fly, they've all failed to fly. There comes a point where the normative accumulation of evidence doesn't say this is absolutely the case, but says this is overwhelmingly the case. And nobody should accept that frogs can fly, and should actually accept the claim that frogs probably cannot lie, because that's the way belief works. If you think the claim is probably true, you accept the claim. And if you accept that if you think the claim is probably false, then you can reject the claim. And that's not just, I don't accept it. That's actively reject. I am convinced for a number of different gods that they are probably not real. Not absolutely not real. I don't have access to absolutes. I'm convinced that frogs don't fly. Oh, I'm convinced that frogs probably don't fly. John is convinced that prayer doesn't work, or prayer probably doesn't work. And I'm in exactly the same boat. But Dave wants to get down to, can you prove it? Absolutely, which is why he thinks he's rational. Dave thinks, I have a God belief. Nobody will ever be able to disprove it. And so I can sit here comfortably, smugly, thinking that I'm intellectually superior to all of the people who reject this God claim. And I won't ever have to provide any evidence. I won't ever have to meet my burden of proof. I can just keep shitting on those other people saying, you just won't accept certain evidence. Yeah, you're right. There's certain things that we will not accept and do not think are sufficient to justify the cause. And if you had good standards of evidence, you would agree with that too. The fact that you had some life-changing event after praying is neat and deserving of inquiry and investigation, but it's not enough to warrant accepting that you found the all-knowing, all-powerful creator of the universe who fixed your alcoholism problem. It needs to be better. There's a difference between saying, I got a new puppy last night, and I got a new fire-breathing pet dragon last night. The nature of those claims are, one of them has mountains of evidence in reality already, such that I'll just take your word for it. And the other one doesn't have much evidence for it at all. And I'm not going to just take you at your word, because you have the same standard of evidence for everything. The reason you accept some things really quickly is because the evidence meter has already filled to max. You have as much evidence as you could possibly have that some mind exists by virtue of having your own mind and experience it. You have as much evidence as you possibly could that other minds exist by your distinct interactions with what appear to be, from your perspective, other minds. We don't have a solution to the problem of hard solipsism. Maybe you're in the matrix. Maybe there's no other minds. But in any case, as long as you're working in that framework, you have as much evidence as you could probably hope for that puppies are often pets of people. You don't have that same thing for other claims. And when there's significant disagreement, when there's 1,000 different denominations of one religion and 1,000 different religions at any given time, and none of them can provide anything substantive, then my position is your belief is unwarranted. That is the claim I make in response to people asserting that our standards of evidence are too high. My question is, what should my standards of evidence be? Because if you give me standards of evidence, Dave, that would admit the God you believe in and some other God that is not the same, then your standards of evidence are too low. You have the door open so wide that any number of God claims could get in. Not every God claim, but a good chunk of them. But if your criteria allows in mutually exclusive, contradictory positions, then you don't have a standard. You don't have an evidence criteria. If the question is, who murdered this person, and your standards of evidence suggest that the butler did it, the maid did it, and Johnny down the street did it, if all of them fit your standard of evidence, then you do not have a standard of evidence sufficient to conclude one of those three did it, or which one did it. This is why we do the show. Because if I'm wrong, I want to know. And if I'm right, I want to like other people to stop being wrong. Because being wrong feels exactly like being right, especially for Dave. Because Dave's sitting there going, I mean, it's hilarious. She wouldn't answer a question. It was, let me get onto this. Oh, can I give you anecdotal evidence? Which is really absurd, not just from someone who knows that we're not just going to accept anecdotal evidence, but also from someone who says there cannot be sufficient evidence. How confused do you have to be to simultaneously say it's impossible, you'll never get evidence for this, but let me give you some anyway? How about instead of trying to give me anecdotal evidence for God, you give me reliable, empirical and examples of philosophical evidence for better standards of evidence than I use. That'd work.
Well, heathens, that's going to be it for today's clip from the line. Again, if you would like to subscribe to the line, their links are in the description. So please go down there and subscribe. And as a reminder, I do host over there at least twice a month on either a Sunday or a Monday. So if you want to see more of me answering questions from callers, please go over to the line and subscribe. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.